The hospital hallways were quiet, except for the soft hum of Christmas carols playing from a distant speaker. The air smelled of antiseptic, but the decorations, tiny paper snowflakes, a small plastic tree at the front desk, and a few flickering, battery-operated candles, tried their best to bring warmth to a place often filled with sorrow. It was Christmas Eve, a time when most people were gathered around their loved ones, sharing laughter and joy. But here, in the children's ward, the night felt different. Nurse Emily adjusted the Santa hat, sitting slightly crooked on her head as she walked down the dimly lit corridor. She had worked at this hospital for years, but Christmas always felt heavier on her heart. The sight of little ones confined to their hospital beds, battling illnesses no child should ever have to face, was something she never got used to. Some of them still smiled, their spirits unbroken, while others had grown too tired to keep pretending. Her shift had nearly ended when she passed by room 214. Inside was a little boy named Oliver. He was only 7, but his frail body made him look smaller, more delicate. His battle with leukemia had taken so much from him. His energy, his hair, even his ability to run and play like he used to. But what it hadn't stolen was his hope. Emily had spent a lot of time with Oliver over the past few months. He had a way of making people laugh, even on his worst days. His favorite thing in the world, Christmas. He had been counting down the days for weeks, but with no family able to visit him this year. The excitement had dimmed in his big, brown eyes. That was something Emily couldn't ignore. A thought struck her as she stepped back from his door. A gift, something small, something simple, just to remind him that he was loved, that Christmas magic still existed, even within these hospital walls. Without hesitation, she grabbed her coat and rushed out into the cold night air. The streets were packed, with last-minute shoppers, families hurrying home with wrapped presents, children giggling as they clutched cups of hot cocoa. Emily weaved through the crowds, scanning the store windows until one caught her eye, a tiny toy shop, its display twinkling with fairy lights. She stepped inside, the scent of cinnamon and pine greeting her instantly. Her eyes darted across the shelves, searching for something, anything, that would bring a spark back to Oliver's face. And then she saw it. A plush snowman, dressed in a red scarf and a little hat, its stitched smile warm and inviting. It reminded her of the stories Oliver would tell about the snowman he used to build with his dad. Before everything changed, it was perfect. As she stood in line to pay, her phone buzzed. It was a message from the hospital. Her heart pounded as she read the words. Something had happened. Something was wrong. Forgetting the receipt, she clutched the gift and bolted out of the store, her breath turning to mist in the freezing air. The hospital wasn't far, but with every step, fear twisted in her chest. By the time she burst through the hospital doors, her pulse was racing. The festive music in the background felt painfully out of place now. Nurses and doctors moved quickly, their faces tense. Emily barely registered the decorations anymore as she hurried toward Oliver's room. And then she stopped. What she saw inside made her heart drop. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree someone had set up by the window. The gift in her hands suddenly felt too small, too insignificant, because what had just happened in that room was something she never could have expected. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stepped into Oliver's hospital room. The machines beside his bed beeped steadily, but his tiny frame looked even smaller beneath the pale blue hospital blanket. A doctor stood near the foot of his bed, speaking in hushed tones to another nurse. Oliver's eyes were closed, his face peaceful, But something about the stillness in the room sent a shiver down Emily's spine. She tightened her grip on the plush snowman, her fingers trembling. She had seen Oliver week before, had watched him struggle through countless difficult nights, but this felt different. The air in the room was heavy, filled with an unspoken tension that pressed against her chest. One of the nurses turned and noticed Emily standing in the doorway. "He had a rough episode," she said softly, her expression filled with concern. His breathing became erratic, and his heart rate dropped unexpectedly. "We stabilized him, but—" Her voice trailed off, as if she wasn't sure how to finish the sentence. Emily swallowed hard and stepped closer to Oliver's bedside. His tiny fingers rested limply against the sheets, his skin pale beneath the glow of the holiday lights that flickered from the small tree someone had placed near the window. She knelt beside him, setting the plush toy gently on the bed. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, forcing a smile, even though her heart ached. "I found you a little Christmas friend. Thought you might like some company." Oliver's eyelids fluttered slightly at the sound of her voice. Slowly, his lashes lifted, revealing those familiar brown eyes that once held so much life. They looked at her, but there was something distant in them now, something weaker than before. He tried to speak, but his voice was barely more than a whisper. "Snowman," Emily nodded quickly, picking up the plush toy and holding it closer to him. "Just like the ones you told me about. Remember, the big ones you used to build with your dad?" A faint smile touched Oliver's lips, but it didn't last long. His fingers twitched, as if he wanted to reach for the toy but couldn't find the strength. Emily carefully placed it next to him, her heart aching at the sight. "I talked to Santa," she said playfully, trying to keep the mood light. "Told him you've been the bravest kid in the whole hospital this year." Oliver's eyes drifted toward the window, where the Christmas tree lights flickered softly. "Did he say I could go home?" Emily's throat tightened. She didn't know how to answer. Oliver's condition had been declining, and deep down, she knew the odds of him leaving this hospital were growing smaller every day. But she couldn't take away his hope. "Not now," he said. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "He said that Christmas magic works in all kinds of ways, even in places like this." Oliver let out a soft breath, his body relaxing slightly. "I miss home," he murmured. Emily blinked back tears. She knew his mother had been struggling to make ends meet, working extra shifts just to afford his treatments. She wanted to be here, but life had made it impossible. And his father, well, he hadn't been in the picture for a long time. The thought made Emily's heart ache even more. No child should have to spend Christmas alone in a hospital room, wondering if they'd ever go home again. A sudden knock at the door made her turn. A young woman stood there, bundled in a worn winter coat, her face tired but filled with quiet desperation. Emily recognized her instantly. Oliver's mother. The woman's eyes flickered to her son, and in that moment, something inside her broke. She rushed forward, kneeling beside his bed, her hands shaking as she brushed the hair from his forehead. "Oh, my baby." Oliver's eyes widened with surprise, then filled with tears. "Mom." Emily stepped back, giving them space. The weight in her chest grew heavier as she watched the mother hold her son, whispering apologies between quiet sobs. Oliver's tiny hand clutched at his mother's sleeve, as if afraid she'd disappear again. "You came," he whispered. "I'm here," she choked out. "I promise I'm here." Emily turned away, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had spent so many nights at Oliver's bedside, trying to be a source of comfort, but nothing could compare to the presence of a mother's love. As she stepped out into the hallway, she caught sight of the doctor, speaking in hushed tones to another nurse. The look on their faces sent a new wave of unease through her. Something wasn't right. She walked over, her heart pounding. "Is Oliver okay?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor hesitated, then let out a slow breath. "We're doing everything we can," he said carefully, "but his condition is worsening. We don't know how much time he has left." The words hit Emily like a blow to the chest. She had known things were bad, but hearing it said out loud made it feel unbearably real. Tears stung her eyes as she glanced back toward Oliver's room. His mother was still holding him, her face buried against his small shoulder. The Christmas lights from the tree cast a soft glow around them, making the moment feel both beautiful and unbearably tragic. Emily pressed a hand against her mouth, trying to steady herself. This wasn't how Christmas was supposed to be, but as she turned her gaze back to Oliver, she saw something in his eyes. Despite everything, he still had hope, and that was something she wasn't ready to let go of. Not yet. Emily wiped the tears from her eyes and took a deep breath. She couldn't let despair take over. Not now. Oliver was still here, still fighting, and if there was even the smallest chance to bring him joy, she had to take it. She turned and walked back into the room. Oliver lay nestled against his mother, his tiny fingers still clinging to her sleeve. His breathing was soft but steady, and in his other hand, he held the plush snowman Emily had given him. His gaze drifted to her as she stepped closer. "You're not leaving yet, are you?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Emily shook her head and smiled. "Not a chance, buddy. I told you, Christmas magic works in all kinds of ways." A small tired smile tugged at his lips. His mother wiped her eyes and looked up at Emily, her expression full of unspoken gratitude. Then Oliver's gaze shifted to the window. "I wish I could see the snow one more time." Emily's heart clenched. She glanced outside. The sky was dark, the city lights twinkling, but not a single snowflake had fallen that night. Still, there had to be a way. She stepped out into the hallway, scanning the area, and then, as if the universe had been listening, an idea struck her. She hurried over to the front desk, where a group of nurses were gathered, whispering about Oliver's condition. "Do we still have the artificial snow machine from last year's holiday event?" she asked quickly. One of the nurses, a young man named Daniel, nodded. "Yeah, I think it's in storage." "Why?" Emily didn't waste time explaining. "Can you help me set it up outside his window?" He hesitated for only a second before nodding. Of course. Within minutes, Emily, Daniel, and a few other staff members had wheeled the small snow machine outside. The air was crisp, cold enough to make it feel real. As Daniel powered it on, soft flakes of artificial snow began to drift upward, catching the light from the hospital windows. It wasn't much, but it was enough to create the illusion of a snowfall. Emily rushed back inside, breathless, and stood by Oliver's bed. "I'll look outside," she whispered. His tired eyes slowly turned toward the window. For a moment, he didn't react. Then, as the snowflakes danced in the glow of the streetlights, something in his expression changed. His eyes widened, and his lips parted in wonder. "It's snowing," he whispered, his voice full of pure childlike amazement. His mother turned as well, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh, Oliver!" Tears filled his eyes, but this time, they weren't from sadness. He clutched the plush snowman to his chest, watching as the flakes swirled in the air. Emily knelt beside him, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Santa must have heard you," she said softly. Oliver let out a small, breathy laugh. Maybe Christmas magic is real after all. For a long time, they sat there, watching the snow fall together. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the fear and sadness in the room seemed to fade, replaced by something warmer, something unbreakable. Hours passed, and as the night deepened, Oliver grew tired. His mother stroked his hair, humming a soft lullaby as his breathing slowed. Emily stayed, unwilling to leave, holding his tiny hand in hers. The beeping of the machines softened. The snow outside continued to fall, and then, in the quiet of Christmas morning, Oliver's small hand finally loosened, his breathing growing still. A hush fell over the room. His mother let out a quiet sob, holding him close, whispering words only a mother could say. Emily's eyes blurred with tears, but through the sorrow, she couldn't help but feel something else: peace. Oliver had held on for one last Christmas miracle, and in the end, he had gotten his wish. The next day, as the hospital halls filled with holiday cheer, Emily stepped outside, letting the cold air fill her lungs. She looked up at the sky, where real snow had finally begun to fall. A single snowflake landed on her palm, melting against her skin. She smiled, whispering softly to the wind, "Merry Christmas, Oliver."